Hi, and welcome to this NFL Fan Forum special. My name is Art, aka the Sea Cow, and this is my sidekick John, aka the Cowlick.
What's up?
Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the AFC playoffs, contenders and pretenders going into Week 12. But first, our play of the day.
The whole deal all out there in Wisconsin. There's McSorley firing it. It's out and a chance for the run by Hollywood Brown. Coming back inside the 20. Brown, a good move, and he will score.
The first team on our list we're going to talk about is the Las Vegas Raiders. They currently sit in the number 7 spot for the AFC Conference playoff seedings. What do you think? Do you think they're a contender or a pretender?
I personally think they're a contender because Derek Carr, he's had playoff experience. Josh Jacobs is looking like one of the best running backs in the league. Hunter Renfrow is underrated, but he's so good. Henry Ruggs is a rookie, but he's making a pretty big difference for the Raiders. And Nelson Aguilar, who they got from the Eagles, the veteran, he's had some playoff experience too with the Eagles. So I think they're going to be a contender. But also don't forget Darren Waller. Darren Waller is a beast. He might be a Pro Bowler this year. And he has more yards than any receiver on this depth chart. But he's still very, very good. He's good at blocking. And the defense, they have a pretty decent secondary and a pretty good defensive line in Max Crosby and Cleveland Farrell. They are a contender in my opinion. Do you have the Raiders as a pretender or a contender?
You know what? I have them as a pretender. Although I think their offense can do pretty well and hang with most anybody, I really think that it comes down to the defense. And from what I'm seeing, it's just they're ranked 23rd in the league. They don't cause that many turnovers. That's huge. And there's only a couple of veteran stars that actually look pretty good, and that's Corey Littleton, the linebacker, and Max Crosby. In all honesty, the rest of the defense is just average. A very young secondary. I think that Trayvon Mullen and Nevin Lawson, I think that they're decent, but they're not the greatest. Damon Arnett being a rookie. I think that that's where their Achilles heel is to being a pretender. I think that their secondary against passing teams is going to be their downfall, and facing teams like Kansas City in the playoffs could be a very big trouble spot in trying to get to the Super Bowl. So that's why I think they're a pretender. Now let's move over to the Cleveland Browns. Currently they're sitting in the number 6 seed for the AFC, and they look like they're doing pretty good at 7-3, but are they a contender or a pretender?
Personally, even though they have a good record, I say that they're a pretender because you want to know why? The Ravens and the Browns are fighting for second place. I know the Browns face the easy Jacksonville Jaguars and the Ravens face the hardcore Steelers offense and defense. That's going to be a win for the Browns, and that's going to be a loss for the Ravens. But if you look onwards to that, the Ravens have a fairly easy schedule, while the Browns have a decent schedule. So the Browns might fall into the third place position in their division, and the Ravens will take over the second place spot. But there's also some people injured on the Browns defense, like Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit, their rookie, Myles Garrett, Porter Gustin, a lot of players that are out. Even OBJ, that's a big loss. So I say that they're a pretender because they are just they're losing star players on their defense and one star player on their offense. So I think that they're a pretender. Do you have the Browns as a pretender or a contender?
You know, I'll make the case for them being a contender. I think they're growing up. I think that their running back duo is very, very good. When you got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt together, I think that can make a huge difference in taking pressure off Baker Mayfield. The receivers are pretty good, even without OBJ. I think that they need to play in Donovan Peoples-Jones maybe a little bit more as well. And Austin Hooper, he's a very, very veteran tight end, knows how to play. And they still have a pretty decent offensive line, so I think they can protect Baker Mayfield pretty well and block really well for the running game. The defensive line still has Olivier Vernon and Adrian Claiborne to go along with Larry Ogunjobi and Sheldon Richardson. I think they could still cause havoc for opposing quarterbacks. And I just think that they're still a contender. I think that they're growing up. I think that they're going to surprise some people. And we'll see how far they can go in the playoffs if they make it that far. Now let's move on to the Tennessee Titans. They currently hold the number 5 seed in the AFC. Their record is 7-3, and I'm looking at their team and I'm thinking there's some things that are good and there's some not so good things. Do you think they're a pretender or a contender?
I say that they're a contender because their offense is spectacular with Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, the best running back in the league in my opinion, A.J. Brown, a really good wide receiver, Corey Davis, another good wide receiver, and Jonnu Smith, a very good tight end. And their offensive line is actually pretty decent, and they have an explosive offense and be able to score a lot of touchdowns. Their defense doesn't even have to do much, just stop the other team's offense from scoring, and yeah, I think they're a contender. Do you have the Titans as a pretender or a contender?
Yeah, you mentioned it before. I think they're a pretender, and that's because I think the defense is just not good enough. They don't get after the quarterback very well. They have one of the lowest sack totals in the league. Now Jadeveon Clowney's on IR for who knows how long. Yeah, I think that's going to be a big problem against scrambling quarterbacks that have good arms, such as Kansas City's Patrick Mahomes. I think that that could be a big Achilles heel for them. And then their secondary is decent, but Malcolm Butler is not having the greatest year this year, and I think they're just going to be vulnerable against really good passing offenses, and so I think that they're a pretender. So now let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts. Currently they sit in the number 4 spot because of tiebreakers against the Tennessee Titans at 7-3. Looking at this team, there's some good things and some bad things. Do you think they're a pretender or a contender?
I think they're a pretender because the Colts offense is meh. I know they have Michael Pittman Jr., who's a pretty good wide receiver, T.Y. Hilton, pretty good wide receiver, and some veteran leadership in Phillip Rivers, but their offensive line is not that great, and they have a few injuries there. Their tight end is pretty good, I'll admit that, but their defense is meh. I know it's number 2 in the league, but after looking at it, it's questionable because their defensive line is not that great without DeForest Buckner in the mix, and losing Malik Hooker is a humongous loss in my opinion. So without him and DeForest Buckner, I think that's going to be trouble for the Colts defense. So that's why I have them as a pretender. Do you think the Colts are a pretender or a contender?
Well, I think they're a contender. I think that win over the Packers showed some gumption for that team, and it's going to build confidence. Phillip Rivers, with all of his experience, is playing well under Frank Reich's system, and he did well last time they were together in San Diego. And I really think that the defense is for real. They may be kind of light on trying to sack quarterbacks, but they're really stout against the run, and they're decent against the pass, with quite a few interceptions. So I think that they're a contender. I think that this team is possibly going to be dangerous in the playoffs, and we'll see how far they can push. Moving on to the number 3 seed, we've got the Buffalo Bills leading the AFC East. They're at 7-3, and they're looking pretty decent, especially on offense. But do you think they're a contender or a pretender?
I think they're a contender because they have guys like Josh Allen, Devin Singletary, very good running back, Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, who are good wide receivers. Stephon Diggs has almost 1,000 yards already. And Dawson Knox, who's just getting started. And their defense is pretty good with Tre'Davious White. So I think that they're contenders, and they're number one in their rivalry right now. I know they have competition in the Dolphins, but after seeing how the Dolphins played against the Broncos, the Bills have a shot at being the number one seed, and I think they can go even further to the Super Bowl. Do you think that the Bills are pretenders or contenders?
I'm looking at it, and I think they're pretenders. This defense was supposed to be top 5 going into this season. But they've been very disappointing. They faced top offenses, and they've given up a lot of points. And they don't get after the quarterback like I thought they would. They're okay, but they're not that great. And then the secondary hasn't showed me what they used to show me. The interceptions are down, and they're giving up lots of yards. So I think Tre'Davious White could have had a better year so far, but he hasn't. Micah Hyde, he's looking slower. I don't understand it, but it is what it is. You get older. But that's what I see. I think that they're pretenders. I think the offense is going to have some points on the board that they'll be able to score. But I think their defense is going to let them down one too many times, and I think they'll be out of the playoffs probably first or second round. Now let's move on to the number 2 seed in the AFC, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending champs. Looking at their team, they're looking very outstanding again this year. But do you think they're pretenders or contenders for the Super Bowl?
100% contenders. Because they freaking have Patrick Mahomes, best QB in the NFL in my opinion. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, best rookie in my opinion. Tyreek Hill, best wide receiver in my opinion. Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman, Travis Kelce. And on offensive line, Eric Fisher, pretty good offensive lineman. Then on their defense, they have Chris Jones and Derek Nottie and Frank Clark and their rookie Willie Gay, who is a very good linebacker. And that cornerback, they freaking have Tyrann Matthews. What more could you want? And they're number one in their rivalry. So I am saying that they're a 100% contender. Do you think the Chiefs are pretenders or contenders?
I would say on offense, they're very much contenders. But to make them a pretender, I think their defense is down this year. Their sack levels are not that great. Pressure is not doing that great. Frank Clark is having a down year. If it wasn't for Chris Jones, they wouldn't have much of any pass rush, to be honest with you. And their secondary is still suspect. They're not getting into interceptions that much. They're not getting many big plays. They're giving up a lot of points to really good offenses, so they're very vulnerable to that. If Patrick Mahomes has any kind of a down day in the playoffs to a really good team, like a good defense like Pittsburgh or somebody like that, then I think that they're suspect to getting beat. But again, if you have Patrick Mahomes, you're always a contender. But that's the reasons I think they're pretenders. I think the defense could let them down in the playoffs. And finally, let's move on to the number 1 seed for the AFC, and that would be the surprising Pittsburgh Steelers, who are still undefeated at 10-0. Contender or pretender? What do you think?
Contender. Ben Roethlisberger is actually healthy this time, and he is looking very promising. I know James Conner's hurt, but they have another good running back in Benny Snell. He hasn't been doing much, but that's because they had James Conner in. Benny Snell is looking like a really good running back in the league. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's looking amazing so far. Deontay Johnson, he's looking amazing so far. And Chase Claypool, the rookie, has been looking outstanding so far. Their tight end Eric Ebron and Vance McDonald are both looking very, very good. Their offensive line is really healthy, and I'm just not going to go through the names because it's actually very, very good. Their defense is very, very talented, with TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward. Bud Dupree also has a lot of sacks. And then you also have Joe Hayden, Terrell Edmonds, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Steven Nelson, a lot of good players there. So they have a good defense, they have a good offense, they're number one in their rivalry, they're very, very good, and that's why I think they're a contender. Do you think the Steelers are a pretender or a contender?
I'd like to say contender, but I also think there's a pretender part to this, and here's what it is. Their running back is decent, but I think that they can disappear in big games, and that's not a good sign. If Ben gets harassed, he could make mistakes. And if he gets injured, it's over. If Mason Rudolph is the starter in playoffs, it's over for them and their run. And when it comes to the defense, if there's a good offensive line in the playoffs that they face and they protect from the pass rush, their quarterback, if they protect from T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree and these guys, I think that a good quarterback could pick them apart. I really do. I think their secondary is decent, but it's not the great defenses that we have known in the past. So I think they're vulnerable to the pass if the quarterback has time. And a really, really good running back could also give them problems as well, such as a Derrick Henry type in the playoffs. So I think that's where they're a pretender. But we'll see. They're doing excellent right now at 10-0. Well, that'll do it for our show today about the AFC Pretenders and Contenders. Tell us what you think in the comments section below. Be sure to destroy that like button and subscribe to our channel. By the way, don't forget to turn on that notification bell so that you'll be notified when we post a new video. Again, thank you for joining us today. This is Art.
And John.
Signing off.